Welcome everyone. This is the Indian Express of 26th September 2022 and I will explain this newspaper in 3 steps. First is why is the news? Second is what is the news? And third is what can be the future prospects of the news? So we see the first page. This first news is a political news. So we are not going to do any irrelevant political news. Second is also Congress, and then this is a crime based news. So first page do not have a specific news today. Then comes the city page, again more of ads. Here also it is a city page. Then comes comment and politics. Here also you see more of political news. So today most of the news are based on politics, but we see one news is there which is important. First is the task force to decide when people can see cheetahs. This is by the Prime Minister. So why is this news? Because in the Kuno National Park, 8 cheetahs were successfully transported from Namibia, which is in Africa. So now these cheetahs are there, and when they will be comfortable and when they will just get along with the surrounding and the environment, then only human invasion will be possible. So currently no humans are allowed to be there, or in fact they are not allowed to show any of the body parts, not even face, hand or anything. And those people who are giving food to the cheetahs are also masquerading them and even wearing clothes that look like plants and trees, so to be not seen by the cheetahs. So what is now the news? The successful transfer of Namibian cheetahs to Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh was the focus of 93rd Mann Ki Baat by Prime Minister Narendra Modi today. And what he said is that a task force has been set up to monitor the progress of cheetahs adapting to their new environment. So there is a task force that will monitor them, how they are adapting. And recently there was a picture that a cheetah was drinking water from a source which is located in Kuno National Park, which is a sign that they are gradually adapting to the Kuno National Park. Now he said that he repeated his request for patience because people are very excited to see that these cheetahs, but he repeated that be patient, saying it will be several months before the cheetahs finally adapt, and an assessment is made by the task force, only after which the government will take a call on whether Kuno National Park will be opened to the public. Which means for 2 months, we have seen this in news, for 2 months they are isolated. And in fact, no human intervention is possible, but more months can also be allocated as per their adoption procedure. So task force is assessing every single activity of these cheetahs. When they will send this message to the government that now the public can intervene, then only Kuno National Park will be opened to the public. So this was the news, and only this, I think only the headline was important, but I explained this thing more. Now we will move to the next page. So this is Express Network. We see a news, Khalistan referendum seen as trigger. Ministry of External Affairs advisory splits Indians in Canada. So why is this news? Because Ministry of External Affairs have sent an advisory to Canadian government led by Justin Trudeau. Now what about the referendum? The Ministry of External Affairs is particularly concerned about the crimes that are occurring in Canada based on religion, particularly to the Sikh religion and Hindu religion. So what is the advisory and what is the reaction of the Canada towards this advisory is given in this news. So ranked number 12 on the 2022 Global Peace Index. Who is ranked number 12? Canada. So what Canada is trying to make sense of the recent advisory is that, so Canada is trying to make sense of India's recent advisory. And what was that advisory? The advisory noted, we have a statement with us, a sharp increase in incidents of hate crimes plus sectarian violence, and also anti-India activities in Canada. So we have seen this in Leicester, UK also, after that India-Pakistan match. A very rampant violence broke out between the two communities in the UK. That was between Hindus and Muslims. Now what is the reaction of Canada? The leading daily, which means the leading newspaper of Canada, which is Toronto Star, it said that the language used by the Indian diplomats was that which one might expect to be used more to describe Iraq, Libya or Afghanistan. Certainly they are not happy with the language that India used. They say that we are a peaceful country. We do not have conditions like Iraq, Libya or Afghanistan. The language which Indian diplomats used was expected to be used more to describe these countries, not Canada. So they are certainly not happy with the language, which means hate crimes, sectarian violence, anti-India activities in Canada. They are not happy. So we will see what actually happened. 2 Hindu temples in the GTA, which is Greater Toronto, and I think A stands for area. Okay, so GTA. 2 Hindu temples in the GTA have reported acts of vandalism in the last few months. What is vandalism? Breaking away, which means destroying temples, partially or fully, in terms of temple. But actually vandalism is particularly used in statues. When statues are destroyed, it is called vandalism. What happened last year? A Khalsa religious school was also vandalized in Brampton, a large city bordering Toronto that has the highest concentration of Indians in Canada. So in Brampton, which is a city that borders Toronto, it has highest concentration of Indians in Canada. This city has witnessed a vandalization of school, and which was a Khalsa religious school. Now what next? This advisory from the Indian side is a pointed rebuke. And why it is a pointed rebuke? And to what? It is a pointed rebuke from New Delhi to Justin Trudeau government. And why this is a pointed rebuke? Which means why it is such a sharp advisory? Why such a strict choice of words? Because Trudeau has supported farmers' protest in 2020. You may have witnessed this. A lot of violence, especially on 26th January 2021. So because of this support, Indian government has advised a pointed rebuke. What is the main cause? It is a Sikhs for Justice organization, which is a pro-Khalistani organization. A Sikh for Justice, it is banned in India. And what has it done? It has claimed responsibility for the rocket-propelled grenade attack at Punjab's intelligence headquarters in Mohali in May this year. So May 2022. We have seen this headquarter of Punjab, this intelligence headquarter of Punjab was attacked. And who have claimed responsibility? This SFJ. So that is why it is banned. Now moving to the Express Network page, we see a headline: Lumpy Skin Disease, nearly 1 lakh cattle deaths. 1 lakh, a big number. Toll almost double in 3 weeks, which means 3 weeks before there were just 50,000 cattle deaths, but now doubled in just 3 weeks. So what is the news? And why is the news? You know why is the news? Because this lumpy skin disease has spread to major parts of the country, which means major states of the country. It is particularly a disease that causes blisters in the cattle's skin and causes a lot of pain plus problems for cattle. A cumulative number of cattle deaths caused by lumpy skin disease gone up to 97,435, which is almost 1 lakh, and it is double from the 49,682 deaths recorded about 3 weeks ago. Now, lumpy skin disease has spread across 251 districts, 15 states, and affected over 20 lakh animals till September 23. So you see, 20 lakhs are affected, 1 lakh are dead. So creating a lot of problem for the cattle. According to the data, there were some 43,759 epicenters, which means those areas which have large concentration of this disease. And what are the epicenters? These epicenters are spread across 15 states and union territories. What are the states? Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, Punjab, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Maharashtra, Goa, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Delhi and Bihar. So you see major north belt states plus major west states. So these are particularly affected by this cattle disease. Now we have seen on September 12th, Prime Minister Modi talking about this disease. He was addressing the inaugural session of ITF, World Dairy Summit 2022 in Greater Noida. And what he said, we have a statement with us. Our scientists have developed an indigenous vaccine for lumpy skin disease, he said. So just like COVID-19, we have indigenous vaccine for lumpy skin disease they have developed, adding that efforts were also being made to control the disease by expediting testing and restricting the movement of animals. Same like humans. Animals are also treated when they are in problem. Like humans were tested and lockdowns were imposed for restricting the movement of human beings. Same way, these animals are also tested and their movement are restricted in order to control the disease. Now we hope soon that this disease get controlled like coronavirus, because humans feel the pain, but cattle feel more pain, because we can cure ourselves, but they cannot cure themselves. Only human can cure them, or the nature. So we hope that this disease gets eradicated as soon as possible. So we see more of political news plus crime news here. Next come world news. This is from Italy, and Italy elections are happening, so we will see when results will come. We are more interested in India related international news, which is India that affects India or a part of India. So Shehbaz government wants to resume trade ties with India. This is by the Imran Khan, who was Pakistan's former Prime Minister. This is a Pakistan audio leaks also. What was exactly that he called for? So he said that the present imported rulers, what that mean? Imported rulers, here he is trying to taunt the current Prime Minister and other people, that they are just importing from India and also importing from other countries as well, for example, China. So, imported rulers wanted to resume trade relations with India at a cost of Pakistan's integrity and solidarity. Several business chambers have urged the government to import essential items, for example, onion, tomato, from India for the sake of consumers in the wake of soaring prices of the vegetable. And why these prices of vegetables soared, why they were so high? Because of the floods that devastated the whole country, even not sparing the historical regions such as Indus Valley civilizations. These historical places, the Mohenjo-daro region, were also somewhat affected from these floods. So India helped Pakistan in the name of humanitarian assistance, because India has called for zero tolerance policy. It will not do trade if Pakistan does not see the terror that it is hampering in its state, which means trade and terror will not go together. Plus, there is one more. Talks and terror will not go together as well. So this was just an humanitarian assistance. And relations between India and Pakistan have often been strained over the Kashmir issue, plus cross-border terrorism. The ties between the two countries get to a serious diving, that means it nosedived, after India abrogated Article 370 of the Constitution. So what does that mean? Article 370 of the Constitution, I think you know, but if you don't know, then it revoked Jammu and Kashmir special status, and it transferred it from a special status state to a union territory. So no longer it does have its own constitution. No longer it is a special state, but it's a part of the country. Also, it became one of the union territories, making Ladakh a union territory as well, which is located just besides this Jammu and Kashmir. So this decision from the India evoked strong reactions from Pakistan, which downgraded diplomatic ties and expelled the Indian envoy. Now since then, trade ties have largely been frozen. But now Pakistan wants to do trade, and that is why Pakistan's former Prime Minister is calling for such talks about their own rulers. He's calling them imported rulers. So we will see. Also, we have seen that Pakistan's army chief have also called for peace and prosperity between the two countries. We will see how long and how truth is in their statement. Next come the explained page. You see there's a explained economy, limits of free monetary policy. So food and beverages item have a combined 45% weight in the overall CPI. RBI is supposed to be accountable, but it can't win the inflation battle without the government, whether it likes it or not. Why is this news? Because RBI has hiked 3 times its rates. Once 40 basis point, then again 50 basis point, again 50 basis point. And this writer is trying to convey that food and beverages item combined 45% in the CPI. So unless and until these food and beverages are tamed in terms of inflation, which means until this inflation comes down, there cannot be an inflation which is the target, which means you cannot achieve the target of 2 to 6% inflation unless and until this inflation of food and beverages comes down. So when in May 2016, India adopted inflation targeting, this is the target, 2 to 6%, which means minimum 2, maximum 6, as a policy goal enshrined in the law. It also embraced the idea of central bank independence with accountability. So at that time, the central bank, which means RBI, was not accountable. But under the new statutory framework, the central government would, in consultation with the RBI, set an inflation target based on the CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, once every 5 years. So now RBI was entrusted with the responsibility of meeting this target, which is 2 to 6%. RBI is responsible. It is accountable, for which it would be given independence in the conduct of monetary policy, which means it can hike the rate, it can suggest changes, can do changes in fact. But at the last result must be tamed inflation. But in the situation that the economy today is in, RBI is struggling to be accountable. So you see, inflation is more than 6% since 3 consecutive quarters. And now RBI will have to meet with the government and explain the reasons why exactly it failed to keep inflation down. Why exactly it did not control inflation. At the same time, having to increasingly depend on the government for fulfilling its mandate. How is this failure of accountability? Take accountability to begin with. So, not talking about law, the center under section 45ZA of the RBI Act 1934 has fixed the CPI inflation target at 4%. So this 2 to 6% comes from 4%, which means 4% plus minus 2%. So lowest is 2% and upper tolerance limit is 6%. However, actual year-on-year inflation 2022 has ruled above 6% every single month. I explain this, 6%, above 6% every single month from January to August. Now, if it does so in September as well, 5 days are remaining. If it does so, if the inflation is more than 6% in September as well, then the RBI, under the same law, under the section 45ZN, will have to submit a report. So I explained you this also, that if they failed, then they have to submit a report to the center and explain the reasons for failure to achieve the inflation target. And also remedial action proposed to be taken by the bank. So it will explain why exactly it failed. So in this case, failure is defined as inflation being more than the upper tolerance level, which means this time failure will be, so 5 days are remaining, we will see the September one. So if it fails, then inflation would be not able to keep the upper tolerance level of the target for any 3 consecutive quarters. Accountability has been a relatively new problem. During the Narendra Modi's government first term, roughly from April 2014 to March 2019, which is Modi 1.0, CPI inflation was above 6% only in 6 out of 60 months. 5 years, 12 months per year, which means 60 months. Only in 6 months the inflation was above 6%, and that too, these 5 out of those 6 months were in 2014, well before the RBI Act was amended to provide a statutory basis for inflation target. So this act came in 2015, this amendment came in 2015, act was way before. Overshooting of the inflation target has been more during the Modi's government second term, 2.0. In the 41 months from 2019 April, inflation has exceeded 6% in as many as 21, which means 21 months out of 41 months. That means half. In other words, a failure rate of over 50%. So Modi 2.0, this is a failure of 50%, which means half of the months have seen inflation more than 6%. And in 1.0, we have seen just 10%, which means 6 out of 60 months. Also, average CPI inflation was also 4.5% during Modi 1.0, but now increased to 5.7% in Modi 2.0. What is the reason? There is a simple reason for RBI's failure to adhere to its inflation target mandate. It has to do with food and beverage items that have combined 45% weight in the overall CPI. The accompanying charts show year-on-year increase in the general CPI as well as consumer food price index, both during Modi 1.0 and Modi 2.0. So we see this chart, you see this increasing from 0 to 7, from 2 to this more than 6. So now during Modi 1.0, food inflation was lower than general inflation in 38 out of 60 months, with formal averaging 3.5%. So this is more of, here comes the more percentage and more data. So I think the data that you learned, that food and beverage items have combined 45%, that will be enough to learn. No more specific data, neither you can learn nor it is useful. So while the CPI inflation has risen and overshot the 6% target, especially in recent months, acceleration has been all the more for food inflation since late 2021. This inflation from the late 2021 has tended to exhibit greater volatility during Modi 2.0, which is clear from charts. Simply put, both the success of inflation targeting in Modi 1.2 and also failure in the Modi 2.0 has been largely courtesy of food prices. You just have to learn that food prices increased a lot and they comprises 45% of the consumer price index. That is why inflation increased a lot. This thing is the concept. Then comes monetary dependence. That links up to the second issue of monetary policy independence, which basically refers to the central bank being insulated from government interference or electoral pressure in setting its interest rates with a view to achieve low and stable inflation. What does that mean? It means when RBI is setting its interest rate, then there can be no government interference or no electoral pressure. And this is from the amendment in the RBI Act. But therein lies the irony. What is the irony? The preponderant weight of food items in the Indian consumption basket, and hence in its CPI, in contrast to developing countries where the shares are hardly 10 to 25%. So in other countries, in global average is 10 to 25%, but India is at 45%. That makes inflation that much less amenable to control through repo interest rate or cash reserve ratio hikes, which means this inflation cannot be controlled just by hiking the rates. What then RBI did? The RBI then is forced to rely more on government action to meet inflation target, because food and beverages is the area of government. It just can hike or slow down the interest rate, cannot do something with the food or the beverages. So far from acting independently using monetary policy tools that seek to curb demands by raising borrowing cost for firms and consumers, it has to depend on the supply side measure by the government. So this is a very simple statement. It means that the production also have a factor. More supply, less is the price. If there is a less supply of food, then there is higher prices for them, which means inflation have to increase. That translates into monetary dependence, not independence. To get an idea of the government supply side actions that have made RBI's job easier, consider following. So in the last 1 year, the effective import duty on crude and refined palm oil. So crude mostly comes from Saudi Arabia, Iraq or Iran, then Russia, and palm oil comes from mainly Indonesia, Malaysia, has come down from 30.25 to 5.5, then 41.25 to 13.75. It has been even sharper from 30.25 to nil for crude, soybean and sunflower oil, which means import duty came down. On May 13 this year, the Modi government banned exports of wheat. Why? Because of the changes, because of the heat wave that came in March. Heat wave came, and that is why production was very less as expected. It was not full to its expectation. This was extended to wheat flour, including atta, maida, rava, suji, semolina on August 27. So you see, if the raw material is expensive, then its immediate products will be expensive. If the wheat is expensive, then atta, maida, rava, suji will be expensive. Then comes September 8, exports of broken rice, which this month we have seen this, that exports of broken rice prohibited. Who is the major importer of these broken rice? China. And what does it do with broken rice? These are mainly a fodder to the cattle. Plus, a 20% duty was imposed on shipments of all other non-parboiled, non-basmati rice, which means ban on export of broken rice. Plus, if you want to export this non-parboiled, all other than non-parboiled, non-basmati rice, then you have to give 20% duty to the government, which means export become more expensive. On May 24th, sugar exports were moved from the free to restricted category. For the total exports for the 2021-2022 sugar year were capped at 10 million tons, which was raised to 11.2 million tons on August 1st. Now the export quota for the next sugar year is yet to be announced, which means that all of the food products are seeing some kind of difficulty. Their production is less, so that is why they are not exported, so as to meet the domestic requirements first, because the nation comes first. The demands, the needs of our people come first. On August 12th, Centre directed state and union territories to force pulses trade millers to declare their stocks of tur, which is a kind of pigeon pea, and upload this information on a weekly basis. Why? In order to keep an eye on how much production can be expected, so that it can formulate its policy next. So that is why it is tracking for this information. Now, implications of the policy. The framework of inflation targeting and central bank independence with accountability worked well during Modi 1.0. So we have seen only 6 out of 60 have crossed this 6% of upper tolerance limit. So it worked well during Modi 1.0. That period was characterized by benign food and fuel prices, both domestic and globally. So RBI could therefore act in almost splendid isolation. And how can it act? Because these food and fuel prices were not that high as compared to these years, which is 2021-2022. So it can act in isolation because it just have to do its work of taming inflation, not the work of government. Pursue its goal of price stability without being constrained by government intervention or even fiscal policy. Now things have been different in Modi 2.0. Last 2 years or less, you can say, from the mid 2021 or the last 2021 have resurgence of inflation. And why this inflation increased? Many factors. The post-pandemic problems, also the problems that came from the pandemic itself, plus the war in Ukraine, which raised the cost of crude oil. Thanks to India that it is now importing. It is in fact imported most of that crude oil in discounted price. If these discounted price were not given, we can assume, we can imagine that how much stress it would have caused to the people. The prices would have raised up to 2000 or maybe more or maybe less rupees per liter of petroleum. It is in fact in some of the countries, some of the European countries are paying this much price for their petrol. So the last include excess rain during September to January. So this was also major cause of food crop destroyment, plus heat wave in March to April. So heat wave caused less production of wheat. Also the deficient monsoon in the Gangetic Plain states this time. So what was the effect? This affected rice because rice needs water to grow, and so many farmers are dependent just on monsoon. It was a less of water supply, that is why rice were not at the level as expected. The production was not at that level. These along with the skyrocketing price of fuel, which have 6.84 weight in the CPI, over and above the 48.86 of food, have rendered the RBI demand side toolkit to fight inflation ineffective. Wanting to be left alone is one thing, but this is a battle the central bank cannot win without the government. So what does this statement mean? After reading all this news and editorial, you must have learned that central bank is somewhat dependent on government for taming inflation. Why? Because of the fuel that comes inside the CPI, 45% and 6%. So both are interdependent. So now I think there is just 1 or 2 news left in the economy page, and then our newspaper will end. This comes a news from foreign investors, slow infusion into equities, over 8.6k crore in September so far. Why is this news? Because we have seen Federal Reserve hiking its rates. So that is why our currency have depreciated. In fact, it depreciated sharply. So what have it done? So whenever the currency depreciates, the foreign investors do not invest much because they do not get enough profit from their investment. So they invest less. Now what is exactly the numbers? We will see in this news. Amid the sharp depreciation in the rupee over the past few weeks, foreign portfolio investors have eased the pace of investment in Indian equities. This is a number 8,600 crore rupees in September. And when you compare that to last month, then this is a shocking, because last month it was 51,000 crore. So a lot less, from 51,000 crore to just 8,600 crore. And this is because of rate hike. And this is, here it is written, 75 basis point rate hike by the US Federal Reserve for the third consecutive time. And why are they hiking this rate? Every central bank of every country hikes the rate because it wants to tame inflation, to control the rising inflation. India does that too, and other countries does that too. So now Fed, US Federal Reserve, hawkish tone on interest rate, which means increasing these rates with sudden high, and the fear of global recession fueled pessimism among investors. What is pessimism? Opposite of optimism. Not hoping good. That is why these investors are not hoping good. And that's the reason that they have not invested much in September. Now comes the last headline, which is from the ADB, Asian Development Bank. RBI may slow down on rate hikes till next year. So why is this news? Because this year we have seen 3 rates hike from the RBI. First was a 40 basis point. I guess it was in May. So first was in April, not May. Second was in May. And May was 50 basis point. Then comes in August, 50 basis point again. So now ADB is expecting that next year it will not raise its basis point, it will not hike it. With economic activity is still to reach pre-pandemic levels, the RBI may slow down the pace of rate hikes. So it will not stop, but it can at least slow down the pace until next year to quell soaring inflation, which means to control the rising inflation while supporting growth. This is from the Asian Development Bank. So it is just an expectation. We will see whether this will be followed by RBI or not, because a lot of things depends on the conditions in India this year and next year. So it cannot be said with full certainty. It says that RBI is likely to raise these policy rates even though economic activities is still below pre-pandemic trend, which means it will raise, but not at a speed, at a pace of 2022. Which have seen 3 rate hikes. So this comes an end to the newspaper. Now you can read this newspaper by yourself as well.